Hello, hello.
Hello. So today we have two of us here on stream. This is
Indeed.
Simon here in Nottingham, England, and I'm joined by Savannah today. And we're going to be
Yeah.
talking about open source contributions as it relates to some of the Redis projects.
Indeed. So Redis as a whole is open source. I mean, whoever wants to realistically can just hop in and say, you know, hey, I found this issue. I'd like to go ahead and fix it. I know how. Of course, it goes through some review processes by people that work with that Redis code significantly more often and, you know, make sure everything's going to work the way they're expecting it to. But I don't think there's very many parts of Redis that people can't contribute to.
Right. And I think also what people don't necessarily realize, and it's also kind of a slightly newer thing, is the surface area of what you can contribute to on Redis is quite large. So people think, oh, it's a C it's a C server. I need to understand C, and it's a major open source project. But there's also increasingly several of the popular clients are now under the Redis umbrella. So Redis, the company that we works for, looks after those, but they all remain open source, and people can and do contribute to those. Also, importantly, there's documentation and even just filing an issue for things that you find problems with. So if you see something on Redis.io that doesn't look right or isn't in line with your experience with better, then you can just go ahead and contribute and improve that. So I guess we both have our own sort of specialty areas that we work in. So what are you going to be talking about today, Savannah?
Yeah, so I'm going to walk through how I started working on an issue for the Redis Python OM library. The OM is for object management. It makes a lot of things pretty easily accessible. So I'm going to walk through how I didn't find the issue found me, but I'm going to walk through looking at that issue, seeing what it is, seeing sort of where those variables come into play that seem to be likely to be needed for that issue. I've got a draft pull request made, and you left some feedback on it. So we're going to take a look at how people can comment on it and sort of what the process of going from here's an issue, here's where I forked my repository and started working on code, and here's where I tested it locally, and here's my draft pull request. And we'll take a look at some of those things to get started on how anyone can contribute to Redis Pi.
Cool.
OM in particular, but
yeah,
it applies, it extrapolates, yeah.
Then I'm going to chat about how you can do something sort of similar with Node Redis, which is what you get when you do npm install Redis if you're a Node.js developer. But rather than contributing to the core code, one of the things that we love to see from the community is short examples of how I got something working with it, or how to use a particular Redis command or feature in a certain way. So I was going to show how we can have people contribute to that and what our process is for making that relatively easy for them. So I will let you chat about Python first.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share this screen. So the first thing, oh geez, I say the first thing. The first thing is we're here in the Redis OM Python library. For me, I was going to start working on a specific issue, but what you can also do is just sort of start by reading the README. It sounds like a really basic first step, but it really does help you get a better sense of what's going on in the repository, what some of the potential key things are that are happening that you might need to know about to be able to effectively contribute to this repository. So check out the README. Sometimes the Redis OM Python library doesn't quite. There is this, we love your contributions, bug reports, contribute documentation. Some have more information here about what the whole process will look like. Ours is pretty straightforward. Opening a bug report on GitHub, opening an issue on GitHub. So what I'm going to do is go over to the issues. I should make this a little bit bigger. The one that found me is adding a page function for find. So this came up actually in our Discord channel for Redis OM Python. If you don't follow us on Discord, I'll go ahead and plug that real quick because it came up because someone on Discord had an issue and had a proposed way to solve it. They linked us what they were thinking, and we were kind of like, I don't think this is doing what you think it's doing. I don't think those variables are what you think they are. So let's make another issue that's a little more concise, and let's start working on it. So if you find something like that, Discord's a great place to start because we really do interact with our Discord community pretty regularly. So we're going to add a page function for find. What does that mean? We're talking about search. So what we want to do is have a page function that says an offset and a limit. So what we're going to do is get the results. So say we have 10 results and we want to offset by 2. We don't want the first 2. Is it a start by 1 or start by 0, Simon? Do you happen to know? I'm not sure if the offset of 2 is actually inclusive or exclusive offset, but I'm sure we can find out.
So I think it's 0 indexed in this case.
Okay. So that offset, you're going to chunk off the first couple of things that you want to offset from, and then that limit should give you exactly how many things you ask for. And because we're using this page function, we want them all in one page. Usually in these libraries, if you get a lot of results, you want to use pagination, which is where you don't get them all at once because that's going to be really memory intensive. It's potentially going to be slow. There are a lot of potential things where that's not the desired performance really. But this page function sort of allows you to say, no, I know what I want. This is exactly what I want. I want this offset. I want this limit, all on one page. So cool. So the first thing that I did to get started on this contribution was go back to the code, and I hit fork. I've already got an existing fork, so I'm not going to do it again. But if you just click this button, you'll get your own fork of this library. And you can see here, sab norm, Redis OM pi, forked from Redis/Redis OM pi. My main branch isn't protected because this is my personal GitHub. I know who's using it. It's just me. The Redis OM Python library is definitely going to have protected branches. So I forked this library, and now I know that anything that I do in here, maybe I'm just playing around with code, maybe I'm testing code out, maybe I don't want anyone to see it yet because I'm like, messing around, playing around. It's not great code. It's not clean code yet. It's not stuff that I want other people to see. So this forked repository lets me really do sort of whatever I want with this code base before anyone else is really able to see it. That's not quite true depending on your GitHub privacy settings, but for all intents and purposes, no one's really going to stumble along this code page. So then we'll start looking at where we think this function should go. Let me make my visual code a little bit larger. So I know that we're looking in the search because that's what that page function is doing. It's talking about search results. So I found the resolve Redis search query class method. And it resolves an arbitrarily deep expression into a single Redis search query string. I was like, okay, cool. This is probably getting close to what we want. So because I've been doing some stuff with Redis search and using these libraries, I know that there's also an all command that will give me all of the search results from whatever query that I make. So I was sort of like, okay, the thing that I'm probably going to want is going to be similar to that page function, but not all of the results. The page function is going to be similar to that all function, but without all of the results. So I looked for the all function. So I see, okay, we've got batch sizes, page sizes, a limit, and then we use this query.execute. So that, I was like, okay, that all checks out. That makes sense. I know that for my page function, I need an offset and a count, and that I want that page size to equal that count. Now, this actually isn't quite working the way I'm expecting it to, but I'll tell you how I tested it, and then I'll tell you about the comments that I've gotten on it. The first thing that I did after I forked the repository was that I had an app that I was already working on to use to do some testing with some other Redis things. So I just grabbed my whole forked repository and put it in here. This whole thing, I just made a copy of the repository and put it in here. So you'll notice at the very top of, sorry, not this file. Where is the file that I need? Well, I used to know where this was. That's okay. So that page function we found in the model. We looked in model.py. We found that all function because it's going to behave similarly. And then, oh, I was expecting this little, that to be my change, but it looks like this is my change. Yeah, so I started off by just writing this, and this is where I submitted a draft pull request. I didn't actually know that draft pull requests existed until this, where I was kind of like, okay, this isn't ready. It's probably not ready yet. I haven't added any tests yet, but I want someone else to get eyes on this because I did test it. I'm just not sure where that code went at the moment. It got misplaced, but I thought that it was working. I did a little app where instead of importing Redis, I imported a Redis. I might search for that here in a minute to see if I can't pull it up. But anyways, I'll go ahead and show you guys what I did. I can find, so this pull request, because the pull request is on this library, it's not going to show up in my forked library. So I go to the Redis/Redis OM Python, go to pull requests, and I can hit new pull request. And what I did here was change. Oh man, what did I change? Compare across forks. That's what it is. So you look at the base repository as Redis/Redis OM, and then over here, you can find my forked repository, sav-norm/redis-om-py. So that's how you can create that pull request. I don't need another one. I've already got one open. But once you hit create pull request, you can also mark it as a draft, which means no one can automatically merge it. It's very clearly, this is not ready. I want feedback on this. I need comments. I need help, whatever. It's very much a, I've started working on this. That's it. So if you go to the Redis OM Python Git, Redis OM Python pull requests, you can see right here that this is an open draft pull request. It's a draft. Here it is. I opened it 7 days ago. My comment was creating a draft PR for feedback on code and or testing additions that should be made and where the right place to add those tests would be. I know that this needs a test. I just don't know where to put that test. So that's another thing that I was hoping to get out of this draft PR was for someone to be able to look at this and say, oh, hey, this is exactly the spot where you need to add that test function. And lo and behold, test coverage goes down. That's expected because I know there's not a test. And then Simon Prickett has left a couple of comments for us. This one is adding a test for the hash and JSON models. Great. And now I know that this file and this file need to add tests for this function. And then here, Simon was saying how he tried it locally, and it seems like it's not working exactly the way we're expecting. So what I'm going to do is look at the issues again and notice that since the issue was made, someone has commented that they found a workaround for it. So I'm going to look at theirs and say, okay, the thing that I didn't have in here was this limit. So if we go back to my code, the thing I'm probably going to want to do is add limit equals count. Because that'll just even more explicitly limit the number of search results we get. I was expecting the page size equaling to the count to cut me off at that number because I said, don't exhaust the results. Exhaust results is false. So I sort of thought that the way this would all work is that when the page size was equal to the number I wanted and I wasn't exhausting the results, I would just get that many results. But Simon found that that's not the case, that he's getting more results than he needed to. So I'm going to add that limit. For this library, because there's a make I tend to just kind of try going make and then see what the options are. You can read the make file, but a lot of good, solid open source projects that people want to contribute to are often really easy to contribute to because they do things like this, where it says, okay, here are the exact things that you can do. It's pretty readable. It's pretty clear. So let's see. We're just going to do make all. And this will give you errors if you have them, as far as like with all of these libraries being installed, as far as being able to contribute to code and being able to run your code. This is where you'll make sure like that you didn't import something that you can't, that this doesn't have. It's where you can test, that you haven't really messed anything up. This shouldn't break. Now, whether or not that page function that I added works as I intended is a totally other question. So that's where we get into trying to test our new functions. So no files were skipped. That's cool. Passed with some warnings. I'm not too worried about that right now. So the next thing that I would do to try to make this open source contribution is go back to Simon's comment and see where these tests need to be. So blob, main, tests, test hash model, and test JSON model. Tests, test JSON model. And then we can see here these PyTest async IO fixtures. So PyTest is a pretty solid standard library for testing these big sort of projects. And Redis OM is a pretty big project. So PyTest will say, it'll basically say like, hey, this is a test. This is a thing that I'm going to test to make sure that it works the way you're expecting it to. So somewhere in here, there will always be a return. And then, there's often assertions in here. I'm sure somewhere down here, assert that member2 is equivalent to member and that member2.address is actually that address. So that's basically what the tests do, is it just says like, I want to test a specific feature. This is the result I'm expecting. Make sure that this got set appropriately. Make sure that these links are what I'm expecting. All of those sorts of things. And I don't think I have time right now to go ahead and write that test, also because I'm not the most familiar with PyTest. So that's something that I'm going to work on maybe on Tuesday on stream. If you're interested, that might be what I work on Tuesday. So for now, what we're going to do is go back here, look at this, and be like, okay, it doesn't seem to use the page size, but on that issue, someone commented about the limit. So I think that limit might fix it. And I'm going to get to testing locally to see whether or not it did. If it does work, I'll add that PyTest fixture. And then there are a few important steps, I think. So there's thing one is going to be like making another commit. I'm going to commit this again once I think it's working. That way, all of these files get updated. Everyone can see, okay, these are the changes you've made. This is what now needs feedback. The other thing is going to be syncing my fork. So because I forked this GitHub repository, if Redis OM Python makes new changes, my fork doesn't get them yet, which means that someone else could theoretically write something that might break my function. So what I'm going to have to do, and I think this is easier from the web UI. I'm sure plenty of people think it's easier from the CLI, but I think GitHub has a great UI. I think they make it really nice to be able to do these things. So on GitHub, I'm going to navigate to the main page of the forked repository and fetch and merge the upstream. So I can go to my profile and go to this created repository. I still don't need to protect it. And then I can just click fetch upstream. I can update my branch because see here, it's telling me right away, this branch is out of date. I need to update branch to merge the latest changes from the upstream branch, from the upstream repository into this branch. Discarding one commit to make this branch match. One commit will be removed from this branch. So I'm one commit ahead and one commit behind, which means that what I'm going to have to do is a Git Stash. If you're not familiar, Git Stash is probably one of the most frequent commands I use. It basically says, hey, whatever changes I've made, pull them off, hold them right here, and hold them right here. Then I can pull in the new changes, and then I can do a Git Stash pop, and it will automatically put those changes back on top. So it's basically, it sort of makes it a lot easier to handle some types of merge conflicts. But that's what it does. That's what I'll have to do to update all of these things. That's what I'll need to do once I want to make another commit to see if I get this sorted or not. And then I think with that, I'll give Simon some time to start talking about the Node and JavaScript that he's going to talk about.
Thanks very much. So
yeah,
well, Savannah there was talking about actually adding code to a Redis project that executes as part of that project and will be shipped to everybody that does pip install Redis OM. I wanted to talk about how to do something with Node Redis, an example code whereby you're not making a contribution to the library as such that gets executed, but you're making a contribution that helps people learn about how to use the library. And the mechanics with GitHub are exactly the same because pull requests and stuff are not specific to a programming language. If you know how to do them for one thing, you know how to do them for another. So all of that knowledge of forking the repo and looking at the issues and so forth applies equally. So what I'm going to do quickly here is just share my desktop. And here we've got Node Redis. So this is on NPM, which is where you get packages from for Node.js. And one of the things you'll notice here is this is a hugely popular project. So every week, 2,358,972 downloads. That doesn't, of course, mean that that many people actually downloaded it because a lot of those will be continuous integration systems that are building things. But what it does tell you is that this project is widely used. It's basically what you get when you do npm install Redis. So most developers using Redis probably use this client. And what we found with contributing to projects like this was we took part in a thing called Hacktoberfest, which runs every year in October. And in 2021, Sue's our community manager, sort of got together a project whereby we at Redis actively put up some repos or some issues in those repos that people could get involved with. And we specifically wanted to encourage people to do that for the first time. So come and have a look at what you can do. And as I was saying earlier, the sort of surface area that you can contribute to with Redis is way beyond Redis server, the C project. So if you're not comfortable with working with C, then yeah, the ecosystem has projects now in Python, Java, .NET, Node.js, Go, other languages, as well as documentation, or just file an issue if you you see something wrong. That is a valid way to contribute. But one of the ways that we got involved in this was we basically built this GitHub Search that allowed us to mark issues inside Redis ecosystem repos and basically say, hey, these are the things that we'd like people to help us out with for this Hacktoberfest thing. And this Hacktoberfest is not currently operating, but this process continues. So we still encourage people to come contribute and do things. And one of the things we decided to do was build up a library of example scripts for Node-Redis, so how to use it. So we actually have one leftover issue here, but when we do Hacktoberfest again, we'll set this back up and there'll be more. But in the meantime, we just encourage proactive contributions. So if you go over here to the Node-Redis GitHub, which is Redis/Node-Redis, what you'll see is we have a docs folder, and that's got markdown documents in it. So you can contribute a documentation improvement if you wish. But where I'm going to focus today is this examples folder. So inside here, these are a whole load of example Node.js scripts for how to do different things with Node-Redis. One of the areas that we've tried to encourage contributions for is for Redis modules. So we extended Node-Redis recently in version 4 to have like native support for a lot of popular Redis modules. So some of the things that you'll see us talk about here on stream, so Savannah's spoken about probabilistic data structures like the Bloom filter and the top K. Those will be examples of extra capabilities in Redis that come in via modules. So what I was going to look at was how you could contribute one of these examples. And you might be looking at this folder and saying, oh, there's a lot of JavaScript in here. How do I even get started with this? Well, if we scroll down a little bit further, there's an index for what all of this actually is. And then a little bit further, we wrote a contributing guide. So to get set up and work with this, we have some steps to clone this repo. As Savannah was showing, if you want to then change something and submit a pull request, you'll want to fork the repo. But once you've got it, there's a simple build process inside Node, and then you just go into the examples folder. And then we've got some guidelines here for, if you're going to submit an example to us, we want you to be successful because you're putting time and effort into this, and your reward will be you've submitted an example to a major project and you become a contributor and you'll show on GitHub and all of that. But we also want it to be a pleasant and successful experience. So we have some simple guidelines around style, and we even have a template script here that you can start out and basically fill in your example code inside this function for whatever example it is you're going to work on. So what I was going to show was I have cloned Node-Redis here, and we'll make this a little bit bigger. Node-Redis here, so I've got my copy of it. You can fork it, and we get everything that you see in GitHub. So if I go into the docs folder here, then we've got the markdown documents. If you saw something wrong or you feel there could be additional documentation, you just go in here and edit them. They're marked down. They preview in a lot of common editors like VS Code, or if you commit them back to GitHub in your fork, GitHub will render it for you as it would on the actual Node-Redis repo if your contribution was merged. But where I'm going to go is examples in here. And we have all of these JavaScript files in here. So they do all sorts of different things. I'm going to take a look at how one of those works, but also how we can get up and running and successful with contributing one. So in order to run any of these, they're obviously all Redis example codes. So we're going to need a Redis server. And I said a lot of what we are working with here is sort of Redis Modules stuff. And the easy way to get Redis modules in a Redis server in a completely built and configured for you environment is to run Redis Stack. So what Redis Stack is it's an instance of open source Redis plus 5 different modules that add extra features. So you get probabilistic data structures, JSON search, Redis time series, and Redis graph. So you could be a graph database. And the easiest way to get going with this, with like the minimal hassle and install, there's a couple of ways really. You could sign up and try it in the cloud here. So we could get an instance for free in the cloud and we can connect Node Redis to that. Or we can run it locally, and I'm going to do that with Docker. So here I'm just going to take this command. I need a Redis instance. So I'm going to basically paste that into here and let's see what happens. Ooh, I've done this before. So let me just get rid of that. And start. So if I do Docker PS, you can now see I'm running the latest Redis Stack server. If you've not run this container before, your experience will be that it has to download it from Docker Hub, so it'll take a few seconds. I've already done this, so it was there for me. And once we do that, I can go Redis CLI and have a look at what I've got in there, and it's completely empty. And then I can do info modules. You'll see I've got the Redis Stack modules. So I have these extra capabilities. I have JSON, graph, time series, search, Bloom. And we can basically get working now without worrying about any sort of install or setup implications for Redis. So I'm going to come out of there and then take a look at what one of these examples looks like. So here in Visual Studio, I have my Node Redis folder that I checked out from GitHub, and I'm in examples here, and we have all sorts of things. So if we take a look at this one that I happen to have up here, this uses a data structure that's open source Redis. It uses the list, and it shows how to pop something off of a list in a blocking manner. So where we like to see example code is where there's a sort of learning point, just sort of setting and getting a string in Redis, pretty well understood. But where there's something that's slightly out of the ordinary with how the client works. So this is using a blocking command here, which means it's one where the client will wait if there's nothing in that list for a given amount of time, or infinity if you tell it to. And then when something's added to the list, it'll immediately pull it off and bring it back. Why is that interesting? Well, this is Node that we're working with here. So Node is inherently non-blocking. So in order to allow Node to get on with doing other things with Redis, when we run a blocking command, so this pl-pop command here, we have to basically pass in this extra parameter to Node Redis that tells it run that on a different connection to Redis so that the main one can do something else if it needs to. So we don't essentially lock up the entire talking to Redis for everything in Node while this is off awaiting that response. So this is a simple open source command, and what I'm going to do is demonstrate how to run these and also what makes a good example script. So here, what makes this a good example script is that it'll set up the blocking command, and then we'll put something on there, and then we'll see a result of it pops off immediately. So we kind of don't just go, oh, okay, let's block forever, and then leave the person that wants to use this example to figure out how to actually put something on the list and unblock the command. So it's a complete example. If we look at one that works with some other data structures that you've seen us talk about recently, so let's pick top K, for example. There's a little bit more going on here. So this is probably a better example because there's a few steps that people need to understand. So here we're showing people that we need to reserve a top K and basically allow some space for it. And then we have an example here that top K is all about maintaining a sort of heavy hitter list of which terms have we seen the most. So this example here has some team member names in it, and it's going to randomly pick one of those up to 1,000 times put them in the top K and give them a certain number of points. And then it's going to tell us who are our most rewarded staff members, if you like. So this is a slightly longer example. And the other thing that I like about these is we don't necessarily have to run this to see the gist of what's going on. So what makes a successful example contribution as well is things like this. You put in what the response from Redis looks like so that people that are just reading this code on GitHub and don't want to like fork it or clone it, check it out, npm install everything, get a Redis and run it. They just want to learn from it. They can see, without leaving this file, what's going on. So it's well commented, and it tells us what the expected responses from Redis are. And let's go ahead and actually run one of these. So let's run let's have a look at this. So we have a search hashes here that uses Redis Search. And this is showing us how to create a Redis search index. And then we are adding some sample animal data in there. And again, it's going to show us when we do a search. Here we're looking for animals that have a species that's been set to dog, what we can expect to get back from Redis. So again, good example code, has the response in it. This is not something you paste into production code, but this is a learning exercise. And as a contribution, it's solid because other people can immediately learn from it. So let's see if this is going to work for us. So do node search hashes.js. It goes. So it did work. It pulled that together and it told us we found 2 results and these are dogs. So that's okay. And I understand how Redis search works, and this will be fairly simple for me to develop. But if you're sat there reading the Redis commands page and you're looking at Node Redis and you're trying to work out how certain options for a command are reflected in the Node Redis SDK, and what a given call to a Node Redis function is actually sending to Redis, then one of the tricks that I always tell people to use when they're developing something with a client and they're not sure what's going on is, let's just duplicate the tab here and let that do its thing. And then we'll do Redis CLI here. I'll connect to Redis here. And I'm going to run the monitor command. What that does is it basically tells us what commands are coming in from clients talking to Redis. So we will then go and run this over here. And when we run it, what we'll see here is a capture of all the commands that Node Redis ran, or Node Redis asked Redis to run for it. So here you see the steps we went through in the code. We created an index. So that's this ft.create command. And then we did some h sets. We created some sample data in Redis hashes. And then finally, we did this search for where the species is dog. So we could take our code here and sort of look at, here's a bunch of h sets in Node Redis where we set these keys to these values, and those got translated to these Redis commands. So if you're unsure what's happening, or if the code that you're writing shows a specific aspect of a command that you wanted to show in your example, then you can use this. Don't try this on a production Redis instance because it does kill the performance quite a lot. So running monitor can cost you a lot of performance, but that's fine on a Docker instance here where we're just developing something, we're playing around and we want to see what's happening inside. So that was basically what I had. So you can also obviously contribute to Node Redis itself. If you found something that is missing or could be done better, go ahead and create an issue here. If you feel that you can tackle that yourself, then talk to the maintainers in the issue. Maybe go create a fork, try something out, and as Savannah said, open that draft PR and do it early, because what that does, maybe even before you've finished, because what that does is it opens up a lot more conversational capabilities in GitHub, and it allows members of the team and the maintainers to talk to you about what you're doing. End of the day, we want you to be successful and we want you to make contributions. So as well as Discord that we mentioned before, you can talk to us through GitHub in the context of a piece of code. And GitHub's great for this because we can identify down to the line level the thing that we're talking about. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. So quick introduction to Node Redis development, but it sort of applies equally to many other aspects of the Redis ecosystem. So if you're working with Redis server itself or Redis OM Python, or we have 3 other Redis OM clients, we have C#, Spring Java, and JavaScript, then yeah, all of this is hopefully helpful, and we love your contributions. So welcome back to Donna.
Hi. So I did find that that app that I was saying that I had been using to test. So I figured I would share that just a second here. Oh, that way I can talk through a little bit of how I tested it. So I've got, it's actually from the stream that Justin and I did together. Justin is backstage helping us with some of these banners that you see, where we talked about food trucks and using search. So I figured something that already has search capabilities was exactly where I'd want to test adding another search capability. So I'm going to do a Command F for page. Oh, that's not going to be good. Let's add, yeah, there we go. So here you can see I've got that page command. And what I can do here is, because this is a Flask app, what I did was in my app.py, I wrote a function that calls for that page with that offset and with that limit. So now that I did Flask run, when I click there and do, well, I'm not 100% sure that this is populated data, but you can see here where I've tested before. None type object is not subscriptable. So you can see here, like, I haven't actually loaded the data into this for this time, but I found this to be a really easy way to test and to be able to play with variables easily, to be able to see data and visualize it and check out what it looks like in the UI, or not really the UI, but check out what it looks like on that web page. I think if I kill this and do data loader, so that's a bunch of 403s. That might not have worked, but you get the idea. So here you can see that this find function I added, that's the page function that I'm trying to add. And this is a way to test it where I can call just that page function so that I can make sure that's the only thing I'm testing. That way, if I'm trying to, for instance, add multiple functions or anything like that, you can limit the scope of your testing to figure out really specifically what your functions are doing that you're trying to add. So yeah.
I think as well, this is a good example of where sometimes people find issues and start contributing, is they're actually writing an application and the library doesn't quite do what they want, and they start digging around into it, and then either find an issue or start making it do what they want, because it's open source and we obviously actively support that. So. Yeah, and so here you can see here that my library import though is a Redis_OM, because this is where I just dropped the whole library into this application. So instead of using just Redis, I've got this a Redis_OM, because that's what this file is called, or that's what that top level file is called. So that took a little bit of finagling to make sure that I was using my changes for the library instead of accidentally importing the global Redis library that I have installed. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that Flask app is, I think, a great way to test, especially the search functions in Redis OM. I've been using Flask apps also for some Bloom filter stuff lately on stream. So I think using those Flask apps, it's just a fun way to test stuff. It's just a fun way to be like, here's a URL, here are my arguments, here's my variables, let's see what happens. But yeah.
course, it didn't work this time, but in the future.
Well, that's part of the trial and error. And the other thing that I forgot to show people really quickly was, and when I get past our internal Okta sign-on on my screen, then I will show you, is another thing that you can contribute to as part of the Redis ecosystem. So I'm reaching for my two-factor authentication as well. Is almost anything that you see a member of our team produce on the stream here or in our YouTube videos is one way or another going to be open sourced and available to you. So I think we've got there. Let's bring the desktop back. So inside here in the Redis developer GitHub organization, there's hundreds and hundreds of repositories. And during our live streams, you will see, you'll see us working on some of these or creating these, and we'll usually pop the repo up there. And if we look for something like a game that I wrote, for example, initially the only contributor to this was me, and I built this as an example of, if I remember correctly, Redis JSON and Redis streams. And we built it out and we made a little video about it. And then we opened it up to Hacktoberfest or anybody and put some issues out there. And if you look over here now, we have like 11 contributors. So, people have contributed to this. And you don't even necessarily need to understand or have experience with key value databases, because whilst I've got that experience, I'm a terrible front end person. So people here contributed CSS or improved my front end JavaScript or put sound files into the game here and all sorts of things. So people just looked up what the framework could do that we used for the demo and kind of went wild with it. And we have, like a nice animated GIF in here. You can see what the game looks like and all of that stuff. So if you're out there and you're looking for ways to contribute, anything that you see our team doing is essentially public. So you can go find it and contribute to it. And we always love receiving those extra GitHub notifications, like someone else has thought about or wants to do something that we started out with. Just wanted to remind people that that's always an option as well. There's this wide universe of things you can do.
Absolutely. And like contributing to open source is such a great way to get more involved in developer communities, get more involved in having feedback on your code. I know that's something that I didn't get a lot of in college was, my assignments were always you either got the right answer or you didn't. No one really actually told me whether or not I was using best practices or, if I could have done something more elegantly or been more clear in my comments. It was just, did it do the thing or not? Which, for a college assignment is fine. But when you're in the real world, if you're writing production level code, hypothetically, someone needs to be able to go in 5 years later and look at your code and know what you're doing and know what you meant and know where everything came from. So getting that feedback from open source contribution and being able to say, like, I went through the process, I had my code reviewed, I received comments on it, and I improved it. That's such a great step towards becoming a better developer.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's independent of what language or skill set you happen to have. So, if you're primarily front end, this is what we realized with Hacktoberfest was like, we actually have things that people that are front end developers can work on, even though we as a company, our only products are sort of very back-endy database focused things. Go have a root around in Redis Developer or watch some of our previous YouTube or Twitch streams. And if you see something on there that appeals, then by all means, feel free to contact us or just go ahead and make it better and let us know.
Yeah.
We'll merge it. And obviously then you'll get some credit for doing that and you'll be a contributor on our repos.
Well, I think that wraps up why you should think about contributing to open source. And I hope we gave you a better idea of a couple of ways to get started.
Yeah, hope so. And just sort of one last thing, we're in Discord. If you want to come chat to us about that, anything Redis or pretty much most software development topics. We have channels for all sorts of things. And it's Friday evening here, so I'm going to be done for the weekend. I think Savannah's got a little bit longer in her day, but
Indeed.
yeah, wish you all a great weekend and see you next time.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.